Hey, good morning, friends. Today we have a very exciting project that we're going to be taking on. We're going to be installing a brand new Maxx Air Deluxe vent fan in our 2025 rock solid cargo trailer, straight from Renowned Cargo Trailers up in Douglas, Georgia. It's a little bit of a daunting task because we're going to be cutting a square hole right in the middle of our brand new trailer. But hopefully we've watched enough YouTube videos, done enough market research to understand how this works, and we're gonna bring you guys along for the ride. So before we get into the actual project, let's talk about the Maxx fan itself and talk about how this project is hopefully gonna go. Going with the deluxe model, let's get this box over here, with the smoke lid cover to it to kind of match our blackout package and everything we've got going on our trailer. The other reason why I went with this one is because it does come with a remote. Our trailer has extra height in it, and most of my family members are on the shorter side, and so they're not going to be able to reach up there to the roof and manually turn the fan on and off, and also manually open and close it. So I decided to go with the one that had the remote control for it. That way all of those features can be operated from the ground. When you open your box, it's going to come in really three major pieces. It's going to be the fan itself, the shroud for the inside that goes on the inside of the trailer, and then this flange that is actually going to go on the top. And the way this works is this is designed to fit into a 14-inch by 14-inch square. Now I've seen a lot of people on YouTube just simply take this, trace out the template on their roof, and then start to cutting. My understanding is that that's not the best way to do it. What people have done that I've seen that I liked is they make a template, a 14 by 14 inch template out of plywood, and then drill holes in all four corners of this template once they get on the roof to actually use as your tracer to cut out your hole. The other thing that I would tell you is that when you measure the inside of this flange, it's actually not going to be 14 by 14 perfect. It's going to be a little bit smaller. So if you make a perfect 14 by 14 square, what that actually is going to give you is a slight bit of play and wiggle room when you go to slide this in your hole so that it goes in there nice and smooth. It's not going to be too tight so that it kind of wants to squeeze it and makes it hard to get the flange in there, and then ultimately get the fan mounted on top of the flange itself. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the pieces themselves. Let's talk about how we're actually going to mount this to the roof. But before we do that, actually, let's talk about what we're going to do with this template. So what I did with my template is I found exactly where I wanted to mount my vent fan on the roof. I found the middle between those two studs on either side, and then I also found the middle from forward to backward, and then I simply marked that with a center hole. And then what I did is I lined up my template and I simply traced a square around that. And when you measure this, it's gonna be exactly 14 by 14. It might be 1/8 of an inch long on each side, but that's okay. A little bit of play is actually desired in this project. That way, again, that flange slides in that hole nice and easy. Once you get this square traced out onto the inside of your trailer, I would highly encourage you to take the flange itself, put it up against your square that you drew to make absolutely certain that you've done things correctly, because once you cut that hole, there's no going back. Hard to come back from that one. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I have my template traced onto the roof, I'm going to send 4 holes through each of those corners in the square that I've drawn, so that I'll know where to draw the square on top of the roof and how to translate that to the top. The other thing I forgot to mention was that I made this over the week as I was preparing to do this project. It's a handy dandy checklist, and all of these steps I found either on YouTube or on eTrailer's website. eTrailer is actually the company that I went through to buy the vent fan. They have a lot of good resources on their site. They even have installation videos on multiple applications for this vent fan. And so what I did is I just watched that video, and as they were going through the video and doing their installation on their cargo trailer, I simply made some notes. That way when I get to doing my project, hopefully I won't get any of the steps goofed up. But anyway, just something that might be a little helpful for you as well. Alright, probably the most nerve-wracking part of this is actually pulling the trigger and doing it, putting holes in your rig. So I guess without further ado, here goes nothing. Like I said, I'm just going to drill 4 holes inside the 4 corners of my square that I drew on the roof, And from my understanding, you always want to start smaller and then work your way up to the bigger drill bit that ultimately can be used for your jigsaw. So here we go. There's one. Two. Three. And four. Alright, so that's the, I guess, the no turning back point. The next thing I'm going to do is go up. I'm going to walk up to my bigger drill bit. That way when I get on the roof, I can actually use my jigsaw to cut out the hole. Alright, so at this point I've got all my holes drilled. The next thing I want to do is take that template that I made, go up on the roof, and use my Sharpie, well, overlay the template onto the square that I've drilled here using my holes, and then trace around that template using the holes that are provided as a guide to translate this square up to the top. So when you're climbing on the roof of a cargo trailer, typically you're going to want to be on some sort of wider support. That way you don't fall through the roof. As you can see, I've got the square traced on my hole up here, aligned with my holes. So at this point, I think I'm ready to actually start the cut. I'm going to be using a medium metal blade. I tested this at home. It worked pretty good on a piece of scrap plywood that I had, because the plywood on my trailer on the roof is quite a bit thicker than the last trailer that we had. So I wanted to make sure that it would not only cut through the plywood, but obviously also the metal too. So let's see how this is gonna go. inside. Well, there she is, folks. Now the moment of truth. See this sponge. Like a glove. Perfect. And you know, the other thing I would say is that if you notice, you've got quite a bit of real estate with where they put these mounting holes relative to the side of this flange right here. They give you quite a bit of real estate, so that's what I meant earlier when I said if that hole is not exactly 14 by 14, it's really not that big of a deal. You know, as long as you don't make it too big, like enormously too big or obviously too small, it should be good. All right, so there's our whole flange fits. Time for the next step. Next step is going to be taking our butyl tape and getting a nice layer of butyl tape all around our flange. But before I do that, I'll take my shop vac, clean all this crap up. The other thing you're going to want to do is get you a file, kind of smooth out these edges as much as you can. Again, not quite so sharp. It will cut you, so be really careful when doing this. Alright, let's go do some cleanup. Alright, so there's the flange knotted in the hole. I put fuel tape on all four sides on the underside of the flange. Gave it a nice push. Make sure I got a nice seal in here. Now let's go back down to the bottom of the trailer and I will show you what the next step of this project is. Alright, so when you're mounting one of these things in a cargo trailer, I would say the odds are pretty good that it's just going to be the thin metal roof on top and not this piece of plywood. Even if you do have a piece of plywood, it's probably not going to be as thick as the one that I have. And I would say mine is thicker than most. It's maybe, I don't know, it might be 1/4 of an inch. I don't know. They put a nice piece of wood up here, that's for sure. But I probably could just shoot some screws straight down through the wood and it'd probably be fine. This thing's pretty stout the way it is, but I'm gonna over-engineer this thing just because I want to make absolutely sure that this thing does not come off at any point. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some pieces of 2x4 and I'm gonna build me a wooden frame all the way around this thing so that I can use longer screws, go deeper, and ultimately get a little bit more bite so that this thing will be a little bit more structurally sound. So that's what I'm gonna do next. I didn't film that obviously, but this is what I ultimately came up with in terms of the framing and the support for this thing. So all I did was I cut down some 2x4 and I made me a square frame. I used pocket holes to bring the pieces of the frame together. And although this frame itself is not secured to the metal frame, which I would probably prefer it was, I guess I could probably drill some pocket holes here and maybe run some self-tappers into the frame. We'll see about that, but I feel like at the very least, by the time I go up top and I drill in my flange from the top and it grabs onto this board and smashes everything together, I mean, that's gonna be pretty stout. The only thing that's shaking here is the roof. So this thing is gonna be pretty solid when it's all said and done. So at this point, I'm just gonna go up on top of the trailer and start walking some of my screws from the outside into the flange and then ultimately into this 2x4. Something that's gonna seem like a no duh, but easy to forget about, is make sure the vent fan actually fits in this hole, and make sure that it lines up with these clips before you start screwing everything down and sealing it up. Just like a friendly reminder. I'm just gonna do what I'm doing now. I mean, probably not necessary given the types of screws that I'm using, but I like to pre-drill all my holes, especially when I'm just getting started. And I'm gonna do, I already got one screw in this one, so to make sure this thing tightens down evenly, I'm gonna do one in the opposite corner next. So, I'll do one over here. And then finally, one in the last corner. So this thing, it bit into my 2x4 frame really nice, and I'm pretty pleased on how that went. I think it's going to give it a lot of structural integrity. And the next thing I need to do is simply put screws in all the other holes and finish tightening this thing down. This is what the finished product looks like. I would say that by far the hardest part about this project was actually mounting the fan to the flange. I was pretty stressed about the cutting the hole, but honestly at the end of the day that was the easiest part. Cutting the hole was easy. Mounting the fan to that flange was super difficult. And I think the reason why I had such a hard time with it is because when I bolted that flange to the roof, I think it kind of got cockeyed and warped a little bit, so it wasn't exactly level. And I think that was causing some of the holes to not line up correctly. But if anybody has any tips or any different experience that could help other people, definitely drop a comment. I'm actually thinking I might put another one of these towards the back of our trailer since our cargo area is so big. That way we can have two fans to help circulate the air a little bit more. But yeah, I got everything all sealed up with the lap sealant. Hopefully it's watertight. I don't think there should be any issues with the water leakage. I made sure I used more than I should, but better safe than sorry when it comes to water. I'll climb down below and kind of show you what the inside looks like. So this is what the inside looks like. This is by far the part that I'm the most pleased with. I had this vision in my mind of how I wanted this to go and how it would look, and very rarely does that actually happen because normally I find a way to goof stuff up, but it worked out exactly as I was hoping that it would. In this frame, I was a little worried at first about not having those 2x4s somehow connected to the metal studs of the roof for some stability, but man, this thing is, I mean, it's rock solid. It is not going anywhere, and it's super sturdy. And the way that I was able to put the furring strips up to, you know, divide everything off, and then added the insulation. I finished up all that process yesterday too. Turned out super good. It's gonna be a great little area to run our planks for our roof ultimately. For the wire, I ended up drilling a hole straight through this 2x4 right here. I drilled a hole all the way through, and then I just kind of routed the wire along one of these frames of the 2x4 and then out this furring strip. And I'm gonna trace this wire all the way down that furring strip to the wall, and then use that wall, the existing wiring on that wall, to run the wires for the vent fan, the power wires, all the way to the front, which will ultimately get routed in our little hole over there. That's where all of our wires are gonna come from. So anyway, pretty fun project actually. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was gonna be. It wasn't quite as scary. Just make sure you measure twice. I ended up measuring like 3 or 4 times just to make absolutely sure I had everything right before I went to cutting on the trailer. And then like I said, that mounting the fan to the flange itself was by far the hardest part. I think I could have done that a little bit different had I almost wonder if you could mount the fan, get the screw started on that flange, and then screw everything down on the flange after the fact. I'm not sure if you could fit a drill in there or not after the fact, but I don't know, just something to think about. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to somebody, but this is how you do this on a cargo trailer. I think it worked out pretty good. All right, y'all have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll see everybody again soon for the next project.